It is 3:05. You call when we can start.
Yeah. All right. Welcome everybody who just joined us. So I have the pleasure of introducing some colleagues of mine who I've worked with through emergency management planning.
Stacy, to the camera.
Yeah, to the camera. Okay, I didn't realize we had a camera up there. Hi. Yes. So I have worked with Tina Lindquist and Ace Bonnema through a hazard mitigation planning in Grant County and Kandiyohi County respectively. And about a year ago, or maybe less, they asked me to help them with another project, which they'll talk about. But I was thinking about the material that we work on together and how the geospatial community has wanted to support our emergency management community more, and especially in rural communities. And a lot of the work that we do in committees is kind of metro-centric. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to hear from some people who work in more rural counties and their experience with using GIS to support their mission and their activities in emergency management. So they're going to introduce themselves more. Okay, thanks for coming.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't like being on camera. I'm one of those Zoom people that usually has my video up, and now I have it right here. So that might be the hardest part about this. Ace and I just wanted to start off with this slide today because, well, one, as you get to hear me talk, I'm very funny, at least in my own mind. And I love this slide. Ace, I don't know how you feel about it, but it's kind of a fun way to depict emergency managers. I happen to be an informal emergency manager. I work with my community partners a lot. Ace is very professional, but still works with his community partners a lot. So we were giggling about this, and this really sums it up most days for us. You know, what our friends think we do, what our parents think we do, what the boss thinks we do, which our bosses would be our commissioners, what the world thinks, what I think, and then what we actually do. And so today we're excited to be here because GIS is an amazing resource for emergency management, and we're really excited to talk about how we think emergency management and GIS can grow in that relationship together. If there was any question, I was the one on the top left and Tina was the lower one on the left. My name is Ace Bonnema. I'm Deputy Emergency Management Director for Kandiyohi County. We have a population of about 40,000 in our county. City of Wilmer about 20,000. 33 years of public safety service. It was dispatch, volunteer fire, EMS, and then moved over to emergency management. And our county does have a GIS department, and I have him on speed dial today so that when you ask questions, it's like I can show you how GIS works in Kandiyohi County, and it's like, hello, Matt, I have an issue. So. I'm Tina Lindquist, like I said already, from Grant County, West Central Minnesota, the most beautiful land in all of Minnesota. I've been there 25 and a half years. I've been in emergency management for 24 and a half. We do not have our own GIS department. We contract with ProWest. And so Ace and I's perspective with GIS is a little bit different because he has coworkers that he sees every day at work that he works with. I have a contractor who is wonderful, very nice, but I don't work with them often or see them often. We'll just bring those different perspectives to this presentation. So how we met Stacy, as she said, we in emergency management, each county has to update their hazard mitigation plan every 5 years, and it's exciting to have data on maps and websites now, and Stacy is a big part of helping us to do all that. And then, like she alluded to, about a year ago, Ace and I teamed up to tackle a problem that we face in Minnesota
And we formed a work group, and we knew we were gonna get into to what our concern was and the solutions that, you know, we think will work, and our work that we did within that work group. But we were really excited when we called Stacy up and said, hey, we have this idea, can you help us make some maps? And without Stacy and her colleague Jane at Spatial, I don't think we'd be as far advanced in our weather radar project as we are today.
Taking one step further back, I met Stacy at an AMM conference, I believe, when she came up and during a break, and it's like, oh, Kandiyohi County, we're gonna start working on your hazardous mitigation plan and stuff. And so that's where we met her when we started working on the radar issue here. And I saw some of the cool work that she was doing with putting data into our hazardous mitigation plan. I gave her a call and it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. And so now she's like on speed dial, because the stuff that, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but I call it pure flipping magic. She makes it look easy, and that's where our biggest thing here is that we're not the smart ones in the room. We're not the experts. We don't even know what questions we should be asking, but we're here to make sure that you guys are talking to your emergency managers and saying, this is what we have to offer. And then some of the things that you went through in your meeting when you're talking about the USGN, I can't even spell it right. Did I probably screwed that up? But make sure that you're getting that information to the lowest common denominator. We'll talk about it a little bit later in our presentation about how we use it for some missing person stuff. But it's really important to not be afraid to go back to the ground level and say, okay, don't think of this as a national thing. Think of how you're going to use this in your backyard and why it's important to you.
And to piggyback off that, listening to your meeting, it you know, it's very strategic, and this high level leadership information and how people in charge with authority make decisions. But I'd also challenge you when you're thinking about GIS and all your priorities that you talked about, to think about how this can affect, how this can be tactical. How can this impact or help boots on the ground and doing things out in the field? Because, you know, there are the worst days when that tornado comes and takes out a whole town. But there's a lot of incidences every day or every week that are happening that are a little more common, like a large structure fire, an evacuation, you know, a short-term shelter in place, and how data on a map can help the tactical efforts. So there's in emergency management, I always like to think of it, there's strategy and there's tactical, and we need both. So I would challenge you guys when you're thinking about things to think about both of those as well, because I really see GIS putting data on a map to be the future of how emergency management is successful in responding and recovering to disasters. Ace and I put this emergency management wheel on this slide because we're going to come back to it in a little bit later in the presentation, because we really think that this explains a lot of what we do, you know, the mitigation stuff. Obviously GIS is involved, Stacy does that already, but how we can use it, you know, strategically and as, you know, tactics and preparedness, public education, response, and recovery. So the project that we have alluded to here now a couple times, the Minnesota Expand Weather Radar project, came about for, you know, a lot of reasons, but just a very quick synopsis of the history of it. We know there's areas where, and especially where I live, where when we have bad weather, I get slammed with phone calls as soon as the thunderstorm has gone through. Why didn't I get alerted? Why didn't code red go off? Why aren't we in the whatever? We just saw a funnel cloud. And for years, I've been talking to the National Weather Service saying, how come we're not getting some of this information sooner? Why, what are we missing here? And it's just kind of been legendary that we live in the black hole in Western Minnesota. And I never really knew what that meant. And Ace has been with public safety a long time, and Ace had a personal friend who was killed by a tornado. And we kind of got together and we said, you know, there's something going on here, we need to get to the bottom of it, we need to figure out exactly what's happening, why it's happening, and what we can do about it. So Ace really was a driving force in all of that, and kind of got the ball rolling, and how we ended up together. Previously, before this project, we'd worked together quite a bit on the armor project, when the state of Minnesota deployed the armor infrastructure and network out.
Armor is the Allied Radio Matrix for Emergency Responders, the radio system, basically.
So when we started, talking about this and saying, how can we explain to ourselves and to our public, what is going on, what's happening with the weather, why are we missing some information? And through that, we learned exactly how a radar works. And when we got together as a work group and started working on this, we used my Grandma Helen, as our lowest common denominator in making sure that Grandma Helen could understand what we're trying to say. Because if Grandma Helen could understand it, we know when we push out our public education on social media and things like that, the majority of the public will be able to understand it. So we got together with some really smart people, and they explained to us how weather radars work. And Jane, who is a colleague of Stacy's, she helped us develop these images on how a weather radar works. And we know that, well, you talk, you're smarter than me.
No. Well, for us in West Central Minnesota, we are covered by Chanhassen weather in the Twin Cities here. And first of all, they are our partners. We don't want to say anything bad. So if it sounds like we're dissing on the National Weather Service, we're not. We are trying to give them more tools. They have these fancy radars called S-band radars. They don't even make them anymore. They go a long ways. But the long ways is about 80 miles for optimum readability. And as the curvature of the earth happens, and that radar is going out, more things are falling into that gap. And with Stacy's help and Jane's help, we're able to show that, and we'll get into it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And so I'll just take Grant County, where we physically sit on the map. Our National Weather Service field office is out of Grand Forks. We're the furthest location away from Grand Forks. So where we sit on the map, we literally do fall into that little bit of the low level dark hole that the radar beam isn't capturing. So a lot of times the Weather Service is calling us in Grant County saying, what are you seeing? We know there's something going on because we can see the high levels, we can't see the low levels. So we have volunteer responders that we send out into our communities and strategic locations for them to watch the skies. Now imagine doing that when it's pitch black out. Okay, number one, scary. Number two, hard to see what's going on. Last May, May 22, we had 2 derechos, small tornadoes happen in our county. Our responders were trying to get out on weather watch. They were getting picked up off the road and set into the ditch because they were driving into these high winds and fun rotating winds, because we had no alert. We didn't know they were there because they were happening in the low levels. And so we knew that we needed to do something. We needed to compel this message to people who make decisions to figure out how we can fill those low levels, that area on the curve of the earth that isn't getting caught by those radar beams. So with our research and talking to a lot of smart people, we learned that 72 out of 87 counties in the state of Minnesota have some low level gap in radar coverage. Because as Ace said, a long time ago, when they built out the National Weather Service, they put these big S-band radars out there, and they put them where the most populated areas were, which made sense at the time. But now, as we fast forward to the times we live in now, pretty much all areas are populated, because where I live in the best part of Minnesota, everybody from the metro area either has a summer home, or they come there to fish or camp, or they're going way up north by Lake of the Woods to ice fish in the winter. So population explosion is what I call it. We can't really go by where the urban areas just are, because those urban areas, those people are coming out to the rural areas, which make us, a a lot more populated and not prepared because they're coming out there not understanding that where we live, they don't have the same kind of information that they do when they're in the metro, when they're closer to those big S-band radars.
So this is the original map from the, basically I got it off of Wikipedia when I started looking into this, saying there's gotta be an answer. A friend of mine that died was a 40+ year veteran of one of our local fire departments. He was a past fire chief. He had a lot of experience. He was killed when he was leaving his house to go weather watch, and a grain bin crushed him in his vehicle. So we can see the storm that was coming. Yes, I mean, we knew that there was going to be bad weather coming, but because of this gap, I feel that if he would have had better radar, he could have gotten out ahead of the storm and known that, hey, I need to get out sooner instead of waiting. A lot of times the frustration for us, and Tina is out of a different weather service, and there's a handoff, and then it goes to the Chanhassen Weather Service. A lot of times they'll ask us to send out spotters, and it seems like as soon as our spotters get out there and they're like confirming wall clouds and stuff, then they'll put the warning out, and it'll be for the eastern part of our county or the county to the county next to us. So we took this map and we kind of blew it up there, and it's kind of a fuzzy image because I stole it off Wikipedia, and called Stacy and said, can you do something? And basically we had we work with the Association of Minnesota Emergency Managers, and as part of that group, Greg Gush, he was a retired meteorologist from the Grand Forks weather office, and he said, hey, I'm retiring, I don't have a boss anymore, I can say whatever I want to about weather gaps. And he's like, hey, we need you to come to the table and join our group. So working with Stacy, they work on, and Stacy can talk about it more and how they got the data. But our biggest thing is, let's just quit talking about gaps and let's actually tie data to the map here and make it cleaner.
So all that work that Ace just talked about really came together when Stacy was able to build us this map that you see on the right side of the screen. Obviously it's the state of Minnesota. It shows all of the counties. The blue circles are where those S-band radars are that are provided by the National Weather Service. And again, I just want to reiterate, one of your takeaways from today is the National Weather Service is a valued partner for emergency management, and everybody that works with them. They are the authority on alerts and warnings, but we want to supplement the service that they're already providing because we know there are areas where we need some supplemental data, and they are excited to work with us too, because we're going to strengthen that relationship and get just better coverage for the entire state of Minnesota. That's our end goal. So this map on the right of Minnesota, we have another one that has a different legend, but we liked this one because when we talked about Grandma Helen, we didn't want Grandma Helen to have to go to a legend and try to figure out, ooh, am I between the 4,000 or the 6,000 range? So we kind of simplified things in this one map to say we have good coverage, which is the blue circles, the S-band radars for the National Weather Service, diminished coverage with the yellow, minimal in the white, and then I call it the gold diamond. Because Grant County is right here, right under Otter Tail, right there. We have this area where we have no radar that can see any of the low levels below 10,000 feet. And what we know, because the really, really smart people have told us, is that a lot of impactful severe weather, not just in the summer, but also in the winter, happens between that 2,000 and 8,000 feet. So that's significant to me and Grant County, to the constituents of Grant County. And so for the first time, I had an answer for all those phone calls from the people, the public that were calling to say, how come we didn't get a warning? I can now explain to them, it's because of Stacy's map and her putting this together for us with the information we gave her. I can say it's because right now we don't, at the time, we did not have a radar that saw anything below 10,000 feet. That was a much better answer, in my opinion, other than, oh, we live in a black hole, or, oh, we don't know why. And so just educating the public, what they're missing on their weather app, because we all have the phones and the devices. We all have our favorite weather apps. When we hear bad weather's coming or it looks kind of funky outside, we pull up our app and we look at it. But I think the public needs to be aware that depending upon where they are physically, they might be missing a lot of data to make good personal safety decisions. So this was one of the maps. The map on the left, again, kind of describes that urban, rural. And like I said, for me, that argument, I don't like that argument. I think it's an important enough issue that our whole entire state, all the citizens, anybody coming to Minnesota deserves to have radar coverage. And because of that population explosion, which we know which happens in many outstate areas in Minnesota, it's really important that this is, not just a rural area. In addition to that argument, I would like to say that preparedness is a big thing to emergency management. So even if you live in the area close to the S-band in that blue area, it's still important to know if you're traveling outside of that coverage area, what you're driving into. And then if you're an emergency management person in the blue area, if we have better data out in outstate Minnesota, we can share that information and give more lead time to the people that have to activate large groups of people into action.
Setting up our committee, our group slowly grows, and we're very proud of the work that we've done in a year. Bringing Stacy to the table obviously was huge. One thing that I found interesting, Eric Waggy from Hennepin County. So we have small dispatch centers, small emergency management agencies, a little bigger, and even Eric from Hennepin County, who has meteorologists on staff, is interested in coming to our meetings and stuff, because any information that we get from the GAP gives them more lead time on the storms that are eventually going to come to the metro area. So it's not just rural Minnesota versus metro or something like that.
So this is another map that Stacy helped us with. And this, as you can see, the differences has the legend that shows, the measurements basically of the areas. So we use this a lot of times when we're doing, presentations like that, but I think it's really important to show the other one, because that's what we use in our social media campaign for the public. And Stacy, without Stacy, we wouldn't have either of those. So thank you again. Other maps that once we started, seeing that we knew there was value in putting data onto a map, but the feedback we were getting was so good, and it was coming from leadership at HSEM, Department of Public Safety. We've gone to them with concerns before, but now we had this map to show them, and we could say that 72 out of 87 counties. And talking to AMC, the Association of Minnesota Counties, the elected officials who make decisions, these maps have no doubt, I think you agree, are the most impactful thing that we've used to get people to become aware and to get engaged to finding solutions. Just this week, and now again next week, at the state level and the federal level, we're working with the tribes and tribal emergency management and our federal tribal partners in making sure that they understand the low-level gap concerns and the potential solutions that we think might work. So that's really exciting. And again, the map on the left depicts where the tribes are. One of the things we talk about when we talk about, why this is important is because there's underserved areas. And I can't remember, I don't want to quote what the number is, I can't remember off the top of my head, but somebody has done the research to see how many tribes in the country are affected by gaps, because this is not a problem specific to the state of Minnesota. This is across the country.
So the tribal partners that we were talking with, and we've only had one or two phone conversations with them, and more people are coming to the table there as well, but they're talking to their people. And I believe it was a group out of Oklahoma that now has taken Stacy's map and said, hey, this is cool. And now they've brought it back to the national map, and they said over 100 tribal lands fall in areas where there's weather gaps. So it's a ripple effect that keeps growing.
And data on a map is where it's at. The map on the right, as you can see, shows recreational areas and mobile home parks, and again, where they fall in these different gap areas. And so again, when we're talking to commissioners, city councils, this is impactful because they can see just through the visual how this might impact them in their communities and their economy.
But here, using data, here's probably the only time that me and Stacy are arguing, because I'm like, Kandiyohi County has way more recreational parks. And she's like, okay, this is using state parks, it's not counting private parks and this type of thing. And she can only do what she can do with the data that she has. So we need to get the data first so that we can all share the data. And there's places like Kandiyohi County and in the past where I've heard that, you know, I think it's probably on the 911 stuff where it's like, well, we don't want to share our 911 data. And then it's like, yeah, it makes sense. But here again, it's like, if we're not sharing the data with you guys, it's hurting us in the long run.
So we identified the problem, we put some data on a map, and our work group was growing and we kept talking about it. And one of the solutions, because there's more than one solution out there to address this problem, but one of them is working with a company called Climavision, who Ace found. Climavision is a company out of Kentucky, and one of their missions as a business is to provide X-band weather radars in these low-level gap areas across the country. And so now that we had a map and we knew that we were in the diamond, and we didn't want to be in the diamond with no weather data, it was really easy for me to go to my county commissioners and say, hey, there's a company out there that can help provide a solution. And we quickly got on board with that, as did Ace and Kandiyohi County, and worked with Climavision, this company from Kentucky, who owns the radars. So there's no cost to the jurisdiction to purchase the radars. And they come and they deploy them and install them onto existing infrastructure, and they pay any maintenance to make it work. So there's zero cost to the local jurisdiction for this X-band radar. This X-band radar went up in Wendell, Minnesota, which is a small town of 200 people in Grant County on the water tower. And the agreement between Climavision and the city of Wendell stands in place, and it is now operating. It went through quality control and went live November 22nd. And we're going to share with you our first case study that came off of this radar. But this is exciting for Grant County, obviously, yes. The second one is going to be going up either in Kandiyohi County or right next to it in Chippewa County, right on the border there in early 2024. So Ace and I weren't satisfied with just getting 2 radars for Kandy and Grant. We said, you know what, we're going to negotiate this. We want to get, you know, all the state with this. And, you know, we were working with Climavision, and our negotiations didn't get us statewide, but it did give us an opportunity for Climavision, for the first time, this is new to them, to do a Minnesota pilot project where we now, between our 2 radars, there's 26 counties, including Grant and Kandy, so 24 other counties that will have access to the weather data that these radars collect. If they choose to participate, they'll get 12 months free trial to look at the data, see how they can implement it into their local protocols. And so we're really excited. I mean, we wish we could have helped everybody in the whole state, but this is step 1. I keep referencing it as a marathon and not a race. We're just kind of taking it step by step, but at least we're getting more than just 2 counties the opportunity to benefit from the data being collected from our 2 radars. So as a host jurisdiction, there's you know, never going to be a cost for the data to be shared with public safety in Grant County or Kandiyohi County. The other 24 counties, if they choose to participate in the pilot project, they will get it for free for 12 months. And then after that, they would enter, if they choose to, into a contract with Climavision, and Climavision's pricing model is based on population. So, for example, in my county of 6,000 people, I think it was $2,000 annually if we would have to pay. And then an example for Candy at your population was.
We were around $5,000 a week. But we're also trying to, they're working with the National Weather Service. We're working with our transit offices and stuff from the ground up. They're working top down, going through different layers of red tape. They mostly started putting radars in the southeast part of the country, hurricane places and stuff. And I am convinced that because of Stacy's work and some of our work, that we're like, hey, we have this issue that they just said, yeah, we'll shift you in the list. They were going to get to Minnesota at some point, but now they said, yes, and within a year, we had the first radar out. There is another radar type system called C-band that we'll just touch on. And there is possibility of trying to get the legislature to look at something like that. The problem is the large cost, maintenance fees. So there's pros and cons with any of these radars, but this is a quick solution. Yes.
There's a question coming from online. Should the National Weather Service pay for climate vision?
So there is a law that they're working on that would allow the Weather Service to do that. The Weather Service itself is looking at, the Weather Service nationally hates talking about the gap. They call it low level something or other. They got terminology and they've been talking about it for many, many years. But they're aware of the situation and they do know that at some point they have to replace these S-band radars. However, the cost is going to be astronomical and right now it looks to me like the solution is they're going to take out these S-bands with forklift and put the new ones in, and they may not be addressing the gaps, other than if they can get agreements like this. Climate Vision does have an agreement with the National Weather Service right now as a trial period to get some of the data in, and if they're willing to pay the contract. The thing is that Climate Vision doesn't want to just give it away because they need to make money to be able to pay for the radars, pay for the maintenance and stuff. And we talk a lot about Climate Vision, but we don't want to look like that we're in bed with them or something. If they have competition and they have a radar unit, we'll put it on a tower across the street from them. More eyes on the sky is what we're saying, and trying to get the biggest thing is getting the information to the National Weather Service. So for Wendell, getting that radar to Mayville warning point is the biggest deal. If Joe Farmer wants to buy it, or the insurance person, or Channel 5 News or whatever, more power to them. But our big thing is getting it to that initial warning point. If we can get it to our spotters so that we don't have to wait for those warning points, that we're going to send spotters out, but now we have better information and we're getting better information. We just got trained on some of this week. And so it's like, oh, that's what, we can all look at what we were looking at our phones, but now we can look at wind velocities and inflow and outflow and stuff like that.
Well, it's interesting. I'm sure the National Weather Service has sophisticated GIS capabilities too, and it's likely that they're picking locations for their radars based on population density and things like that. But what you raise is this whole notion of a transient population that's in campgrounds and things like that. I mean, that's really a GIS problem as well, as long as we have the data. So mapping the state park campgrounds as well as the private campgrounds and things like that are actually quite vulnerable, very vulnerable population during the summer when there are storms. And, maybe it's something that the state parks should do, or the National Park Service, or maybe it's a group of private campgrounds or something like that band together to get these, because it's really, as I'm hearing it, it's a supplement to the standard weather radar, but the National Weather Service sees it as well.
So, like Ace said, Climate Vision, most of their radars were in the southeast part of the country. And so they're in an agreement with the National Weather Service in that part of the country. So those field offices are now taking in their data, and it's going through quality control because they have an obligation to make sure it's good data before they fully integrate it. And they're like 15 months into that process, and it's getting really close to the end. And I just got an email today, since the radar's up and running, that same process is now started in our part of the country because we have this radar, that they're going to start plumbing, for lack of a better way, that data to them so they can start the process of going through quality control, making sure it's good data that they can use, because that is the big picture goal, is that any radar like Ace said, climate vision, C-band, I don't care who the heck it is, any weather data that we can get, we want it to be reliable, accurate data that gets to the National Weather Service, because there are authority in alerts and warnings. And so all of that takes time because it's a federal agency. So as a company, Climate Vision is working at the top, going through all the steps to make that happen. What we're doing at the ground level, the boots on the ground level, is we're just trying to educate people. So then hopefully we can meet in the middle a lot faster than if they just work from the top down and come down. And if we have some positive reinforcement from the ground up, it'll just make it all come together sooner.
And looking at the National Weather Service, and there's many layers, and they have the North National Storm Labs and all these things that it has to go through. But we kind of see some of the issues with government, because it's everybody's problem, and yet it's such a big problem. We're trying to find the right people at MnDOT, and we have the Environmental Protection Agency that is now coming to our meeting today to learn more about it and stuff. And sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, because they have the avionics unit and they have the street unit and they have these 501, and it's like so big. It's like, who do we talk to about coming to the table with us?
And really, I mean, to bring it full circle, GIS is a foundational piece to that. I mean, before this, it was just all verbal communication and people kind of grumbling about bad weather radar coverage and why aren't we getting alerts and warnings. Now we have a message. We have a public education campaign that we put out there, which is preparedness. When we think of that cycle, there's preparedness, and then we have data that we can look at to make sure it's safe before we send responders out to weather watch in response mode. And then if we have a storm, winter or summer storm, and we have to do damage assessments and we have to go out and collect data, now we have resources to do that. And so when we look at that wheel, it's emergency management with GIS, right? Because GIS is about data. So it's really exciting to be here. And obviously we're passionate about this. We can talk about it.
Brian has a question, and while Tina starts this loop, this is the Mayville loop. That's her main warning radar, the National Weather Service on the left, and the Climate Vision loop on the right. And this was a snow event on October 31st. Got about an inch of snow, I believe, out of the storm. So if Brian could ask the question.
Yeah, it's a comment and then a suggestion. Is one of the driving forces between these locations is really actually the commercial aviation industry as it's evolved. When you look at where those circles are, they generally tend to be large or larger airports. And having flown and learned how to fly out of the Kandiyohi or Wilmer Airport, I fully understand the problems with the current radar system. So you might want to think about the general aviation community as another support group, because they're in the same boat. That could be a driving mechanism to get more increased coverage.
And we have talked to them, and we keep trying to find somebody that has the checkbook there, because if Climate Vision can find the right people at the state or even going to the governor's office, and we can work together and say, hey, MnDOT, not just MnDOT needs it. Remember us 911 center, remember the emergency managers, because we're just a small number. I mean, 87 emergency managers in the state. So if we can get that data, did you go to the second radar?
No, I just wanted to point out to the fact that, if you were somebody traveling out to Grant County to see family or to come to a campground, and you were looking at the radar, you would be seeing what's on the left-hand side, and you'd say, especially in the winter, right? Holiday travel. Oh yeah, it's good to go. We can head to grandma's house. And then you get out there and we could be having a ground blizzard. It's that piece to me is super impactful, that, again, these low levels where a lot of our weather is happening aren't being captured and given to the public through current systems. So now that was the Mayville, that the Mayville S-band is where our weather comes from in Grant County, but we also keep a close eye on Aberdeen, South Dakota, because it's straight west of us, and a lot of times the weather comes that way. So this is that same system heading. And you can see, you know, there's, again, if you're looking at your app on your phone, you're gonna see the image on the left, and what's really happening is the image on the right, because we have now that radar operating.
Now, we had what I call the Christmas Eve storm, snowstorm, was blizzard shut down Highway 7, cars stranded, State Patrol or MnDOT taking plows off the road, county plows not saying, well, we're not gonna go out because we just can't even get there. And we were setting up small rescue teams down in Olivia. They had the National Guard out with one of their track vehicles picking up people. A lot of the people that we were picking up were from the metro area. And they were saying, well, I looked at my radar and it looked fine. And sure enough, I mean, what they were seeing, it was snowing in the metro, but nothing out our way. And very serious situation. One of the people somehow ended up getting locked out of his vehicle in the windshield. Amazing that we didn't lose somebody that day. So this is the interactive map. Another thing that all of a sudden Stacy said yes, so we keep testing her. It's like, Stacy, we got this. Can you do this for us? So why don't you come up, Stacy, and help us with this? So we're gonna let Stacy drive and show you this, but this map here is one of the ways that we started saying, where do we want these radars? Because we could easily just say, put it in my backyard, but we wanted to look across, and also Climavision is doing this. But then when the group started talking about, the C-band, it's like, okay, what would that picture look like? Going back, well, Stacy's getting that set up. We talked about the National Weather Service, and they're looking at replacing that system. Their target, I believe, the last I heard was 2040. Well, I hope to be long retired by then. And if we're looking to go to the legislature, we know that's going to be years in the making. So again, more eyes to the sky and where we would place these radars. You can't just go to the legislature and say, we have this radar gap, so just give us billions of dollars, will you? We need to say, these are the gaps. This is what it's going to take to fill the gaps. And this is how we can do it. Here's solution 1, here's solution 2. And if you don't have it, that's fine. But basically what you saw with the circles is, depending on the size of the radar, the S-band radars have a footprint of about 80 miles. The C-band radars are about 70 miles. The X-bands are 60 miles. And it's like the old carnival game, a big red dot, and you had to put the little plates over and cover up the red dot. I spent many dollars at the carnival trying to win a stuffed animal. And it's like, this is nuts, trying to cover all these circles with the little 5 plates. Probably aging myself, but
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
no, that's okay.
I can't, with the one screen, I can't
Nope.
get out.
Basically, what this map does is it allows either Stacy or Ace, because I don't touch stuff like this, I usually break it. But to place different radars in different locations to see that footprint. So we could have a very efficient look at how many C-bands and how many X-band radars we think could fill those low-level gaps. So this interactive map allows us, when we're having our meetings and talking, we can move the dot and see, and we can say, oh, well, this area, it doesn't really make sense, but over here it does. And then we can start trying to connect with those people to bring them into the group to make sure that they understand.
Yeah,
So
You want some help with it, Steve?
no, it's not worth, I mean, you can see it, it's just, you can, the circles with the appropriate radius, they can move. And so they can place them, and then they can zoom in on an aerial photo and find a water tower that's in the area that you would want to target to place the center point.
Right, so on the map, you're
It's
looking
just
at
allows them to move around.
the yellow is the
Yeah.
classification. Right now, the pink is the X bands, and I believe there might be a C-band layer. And we can turn on and off layers, and we can move around those circles, like Stacy was saying. With our X-band locations, generally, we have a 10-mile radius within that circle. And with Stacy's help, and you click on the little corner on the lower right, you can zoom in and you can see shadows of, hey, that looks like a water tower, and that's what we're looking for. And so that helps us And then we can call up the town and say, hey, we want to talk to you about your water tower. How do you feel about sitting through a presentation that's keeping you from going to the bar? So we have.
How JS can help emergency management? Again, bringing back that wheel. The preparedness stuff. All of our public education has either Stacy or Jane's touch to it. The initial response that we all have, I mean, I can think of numerous times where I wish we would have our own GIS department. So I had somebody to call up at 9 o'clock at night after we had some straight line winds go down, and we can start giving him locations, so he can start putting locations on a map of where these utility power lines are down. So when we call the utility company, we can say section, this road, this, you know, this is how many we have. Recovery, damage assessments, it's a huge part of what we do, the paperwork, not so fun stuff, but it's super important in helping our communities and counties be resilient and come back from disasters, and all the data that's needed in a damage assessment, and getting it through getting it on all the layers that you guys can provide and putting it on maps is extremely helpful. And then again, the mitigation, where we talk about, hey, this is our list of disasters that we need to be thinking about, and here's all the data and the maps we need when we start thinking about our planning.
So other ways that we work with, so that's kind of our spiel on the weather gap stuff. We can answer more questions when we're done here, but just breezing through other ways that GIS plays a role with emergency management. I mean, we use it for different things and different apps that we're not even knowing that we're using GIS stuff. Things like CalTopo or StarTopo, which is a search and rescue app. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. On the bottom screen, there's something called Crisis Cleanup. MINVOAD, the Minnesota Volunteer Organizations Active in a Disaster, use this. And basically, and this is a clip from a tornado that we had this past summer that's hit 2 towns, one in Stearns, one in Kandy. And you can call 211 to report that you need help. You have a tree, if there's collapsed trees down, you can see that there's garbage, so that might be debris. The colors mean something different, you can assign different. We had the Southern Baptists were out, Team Rubicon, which is mostly retired military folks. We had Christian Aid Ministries come out, chopping down trees, and they can claim different properties, and we can easily see who needs help, where do we go next, what jobs are waiting, and it just organizes us. Go ahead and go to the next one. Back in 2000, we learned from incidents, unfortunately, instead of being ahead of the game. We had a drowning. Out of respect, I don't want to get too much into the details, but family went out with their boat, decided to go swimming. Driver of the boat went in the water, didn't come back up. They eventually got the boat back to the shore. Trying to call back, okay, where did this happen? We eventually realized that it was going to be a body recovery thing. We were dealing with fishermen that have better sonars than any of our rescue equipment. So it's like you're hopping into their boat with a cell phone, and how do we track it? One of our deputies was a National Guard person, worked with the US, I keep saying that wrong, USNG, but the grid system. And basically now we have the grid system overlaid on maps through our county. We have a 6,000 foot view, which we call our community, 12,000 foot neighborhood view, and then all the other data that can be in there. So if there's a tornado that wipes out a town, you may not be able to send your neighbors to First and Trot because the street sign's gone, the house is gone, there's no house numbers. So if we start using the USNG layer and having these maps ready, it just makes us that much better. We had an elderly gentleman, 83 years old, early dementia. He would ride his bike. He was a friend of my family. I remember growing up with, playing on his farm, and ex-military guy. He would ride his bike around Green Lake, which is 12 miles. It would take him an hour and a half, and he was known to do that 4 times a day. So he disappeared at 4:30 in the afternoon. How big do you think our search area is? Yeah. I mean, if you know where Wilmer is and you know where Litchfield is, we were getting calls of this person seeing a person on their bike in Litchfield, and we couldn't rule it out because he had taken his bike to Litchfield before. It was something that he did. So we were quite unorganized, but by using the USNG layer, by working with Christian Aid Ministries, again, they have a search and rescue team, and they introduced us to Sartopo, a search and rescue app, where we can have a volunteer come up, shoot a picture of the QR code, and load their map, and now assign them to a team. We can set predetermined grid areas that we're going to search, and we can see exactly where they were walking when they were doing the search. We can see if the volunteers are walking shoulder to shoulder, or if their lines aren't straight and there's 10 feet away. Sometimes you have to call in the military, because as anybody who remembers Gary Sigfranius, he's like, my guys will walk through the mud, whereas the volunteers will walk around the mud and stuff. So important stuff using those layers.
So, in upstate Minnesota, I think it's really important for everyone to understand that jurisdictional lines don't mean a whole lot unless you've got competing egos. All of the public safety agencies, including emergency management, we are constantly mutual aiding. We have the best of the best in our opinion, but we just don't have a lot of it. So we have limited resources. So really our greatest resource in greater Minnesota is each other. So that would be another thing that I would just encourage you to think about when you're looking at your strategies and your priorities is, it's not just, one county, Dakota County or Grant County. It's how can this data be accessible to everybody? Because we might have the worst day in Grant County, in Kandiyohi County might be coming to mutual aid, and they're 3 counties away, and they're going to need access to our data.
And also, we can't be afraid of the public-private partnerships either, like with the Climavision. Some of the places that we go to looking for tower space, as soon as they hear that Climavision's out to make money or a private partner, they're like, no, we don't, no. Or they're going to charge them what they charge cell phone companies for rent or something. But imagine a tornado and working with, these people have numbers on all their power lines, all their power poles, okay? So if they have a number 25 on this pole, that means something to REA in our county. But if somebody wraps their car around that power pole, that 25 means nothing to us unless we have that data and can tie it. So is there a way to put a USNG sticker on it or to somehow take their data and tie it together? It seems like a lot of times it works in the middle of the night when there's a tornado that we can call their person, okay, you got your maps, and we call these people, okay, you got your maps, and eventually we'll get to that map. But if we can do that in our planning and our mitigation work, that'll be huge. We're also trying to work with our GIS department on the project whiteout snow project, where we're putting dots on center lines, and I don't even know what I'm talking about here, so I gotta go to my notes on what Matt told me. So they're doing this by locating the accurate GPS locations on center lines of the roads, creating an alignment from those shots to import into a mapping system. Also shoulder and reference points like turn lanes, intersections, to give the highly accurate location information. So the snowplow driver can, hopefully eventually get to the heads up display that they can see whether they're on the road or not, because out in cornfield country, whiteouts are a huge deal for us, and they can't just say like the Christmas Eve storm. They're like, we got to pull our plows off the road, and we're like, we have somebody that left their keys out of the car standing on Highway 7, and they're like, okay, we'll try it. So let's give them the tools they need.
And I think a lot of focus is always given to the spring and summer severe weather storms, which can be awful storms, but especially where we live, winter weather, severe winter weather is by far our biggest concern. Because if it's like this for 3 days and nobody can go anywhere, and we have people that rely on services to come in, or it's an ice storm and power's out for 3 days and there's people on life-saving, health equipment that need electricity, like the pre-planning preparedness stuff, we can put all that data on a map. We can get information from MDH, public health agencies, and we can identify where these people are already, and we can already have a base layer to start working from on that worst day. And so winter weather, is just as important as the summer weather stuff. So again, another just kind of tidbit when you're thinking about your strategies, like remember that piece too, because sometimes there are some differences in the seasons. And then just to quickly go back to the weather radar gap concern, the radar in Wendell, that expand weather rate. What am I trying to say? Expand weather radar is the first one for ClimaVision to be in a climate that has winter weather, because all of theirs are focused in areas with thunderstorms and hurricanes. So they're really excited to start collecting winter data, which I'm not complaining, knock on wood, it's 50 degrees the week before Christmas. We haven't had much besides the one case study that we showed you. Last year at this time, we had, this much snow on the ground where we live. And so, yeah, just keeping winter weather in that thought process of planning for disasters is important.
So our biggest takeaway, obviously, with my stuttering, you should see that we are not the smartest people in the room. Do not be afraid to approach us and say, hey, we can do this stuff. I mean, I was just lucky to know Stacy and say, yeah, I got this goofy idea. And she's like, here you go. It was no big deal to her. And I hope it's paying off in other parts of the state as well, that we can see that this is a good partnership.
Mm-hmm. And really for me, I guess I would just end on this slide right here. Preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation. I truly feel that there's a spot for GIS in all of that. And coming from a county that doesn't have a GIS department, we have, like I said, a contracted vendor, and we have a contract, but there's lots of, all the county offices use their services. So for me, to sit down and take a whole week of their time to do a lot of this stuff would be quite expensive. So it looks different for me. And just to think about that, and again, those overall priorities and strategies, like how can we make this available to people like Tina in Grant County, would be super helpful too, because we are in a little bit different situation where Ace has his buddy Matt that he can call up on a Sunday night. I can call our vendor on a Sunday night, and they're wonderful people and do a great job. It's just a different scenario on how that works. So ProWest is great, like I said, love them. It's just different perspectives and how we integrate it into our emergency management programs. But overall, I mean, for you guys, I think listening to your first meeting was very beneficial, because a lot of things you talked about were things from our world already. So to kind of see that relationship and work together and see how it can be strengthened and grown is really exciting.
Any questions for us? We appreciate your time very much.
My head's spinning.
Yeah.
I have so much I want to talk to you about.
I-
You're talking about stuff that we've been talking about for years. And it's really encouraging. And I mean, one of the comments that came in is that this should be a presentation at our annual GIS conference. I mean, I've been giving presentations at our GIS conference about GIS for emergency management and emergency preparedness and the US National Grid and all of that. And it's, and I'm preaching to the choir, but hearing somebody from emergency management talk about that stuff means so much more, because I mean, you just bring a whole different level of credibility to that message. So I mean, there's a lot to talk about. What I'm wondering is, part of our mission with this committee is bridging the disciplines of GIS professionals and emergency management, emergency response professionals together to do exactly the kind of collaboration that you're talking about. I think Stacy's done a great job of helping to open up that door. I'm wondering, are you unique in the emergency? I mean, we got some emergency management folks in here too, I mean, have you given this presentation at the AMAM conference?
We haven't given we've talked a little bit about the gap when we're trying to get the other emergency managers aware of the gap. And we do try to say, we never try to forget Stacy and include her, and that we couldn't be doing this project where we are. However, we haven't brought it fully as far as GIS. and you see me stuttered, man, there's better people that can do this stuff. So if we're gonna talk anymore, Stacy's gotta be there, Matt's gotta be there, and then we could really put something cool together. And I'll sit in the front row clapping for them, but.
Right, but it's more of the conversation that has to occur between emergency management folks that really understand that stuff, and then the GIS folks understand that, and it's collaborative.
Right, and like I maybe said earlier, the emergency management is different across the county. We have an emergency management team across the state. We have three people in my office. Tina's one person's shop. Some of them are, the sheriff is also the emergency manager. So emergency management is a little different too. So I think that, yeah, those conferences are great. It would be a great place to start bridging some of those gaps. But again, please reach out to yours. If you live in Dakota County, talk to the Dakota County Emergency.
Well, right, and that's happening. But I think there's something bigger that can happen here. I think we may be getting to a point of a critical mass, so to speak, of GIS awareness on the emergency management side and emergency management, emergency preparedness awareness on the GIS side, where I think there's a synergy that can happen at a bigger level, where we can actually create some kind of, you brought up the whole thing about camp. I mean, Stacy's done a great job with the whole critical infrastructure, and it starts with police stations and fire stations and hospitals and medical clinics, I mean, that's pretty basic, but creating a statewide authoritative, reliable data set that everybody will use. And you brought up a bunch of other data sets. I mean, just heading to campgrounds, that's something I hadn't really thought about, and there are other efforts that are happening on the GIS side to create statewide data sets. We've done it with address points, we're doing it with center lines, we're doing it with parcels, police stations, fire stations. You can feed into that. We've got the mechanics, we've got the structure in place to make that happen. We just need somebody driving the priorities.
And I would also include schools, homes, assisted livings, nursing homes. I mean, all these vulnerable populations or underserved populations that an emergency manager doing their job is planning for them. How can we help them? And half the battle is maintaining updated lists and things like that. And there's already processes and procedures in place that have rules and guidelines around them. So like if we can use GIS to tap into a database that's being kept current by the appropriate agency. But so we know at our level, we can just pull up this map and it's always current.
Right.
And just little things like that takes, in an emergency would take a lot of time and a lot of people, resources put together. I'm a one-person show, so right away it's probably myself and I would get about a team of 5 or 6 pretty quickly, but we're doing a lot of critical tactical stuff right at the moment. But if we know we have a data set on a map that we can pull up, that we know and can trust it's accurate, saves a ton of time.
But that's part of it. That's always been the problem, is there's some magical place that we can all go to and get the most current data. And what I think what we've all realized is the best data is at the local level. And we simply need some kind of a process where locals can feed in that local knowledge, that authoritative knowledge about your community into some kind of a common repository. And that's really what Stacy started to break ground on. But HSCM is doing this too, and FEMA is doing this. You have to provide, spreadsheets with latitude, longitude, and things like that. But it's not really, we can put that into GIS, but it's not really GIS enabled for everybody to just go and use.
Yeah, and like I said before, sometimes it's on the locals that don't want to share and stuff like that. We had a train derailment in the city of Raymond, which is right on the county line. Neighboring Chippewa County, right across the road, we ended up evacuating to a school in a small community nearby. This community is like, how come you didn't use us? Well, it was a different region of the state. I don't even know the emergency manager's name there, and it's like, that's on me that I didn't do that. But with some of our turf battles and protecting our data and stuff, and we did all this work, why should we give it to the state? Maybe if there's a way to, like, even if you I'm like, grandma, I need to see it. So show me the picture of what it can do. So if I'm taking a map like Stacy's and I'm drilling down and now I can see fire territories, hey, I can drill down one more step and I can see fire hydrants. So now I can use it for my emergency planners. And even if the water people and the fire people locally don't want to share it, as soon as you say, hey, we want to include Raymond and Meeker County and some of our neighbors that you mutual aid with. It's like, oh yeah, we want them to have our information. Guess what? Then you need to share data and let's get a little bigger.
Yeah.
There's a very thoughtful and long question online from Teresa. Rather than me read, Teresa, you want to just unmute and ask your question?
While she's doing that, Stacy had her hand up and I don't want to piss Stacy off.
Oh, okay.
Stacy, really quick.
No, I just want to go back to one of Randy's original questions at the beginning of that conversation was just, I think what he was going to ask was, do you feel like you're representative of a lot of the more rural counties? And in terms of, if you were to speak to the county, like the AMEM conference and give this thing, do you think you might change minds of planners about sharing their data? Because from our perspective, we know all this stuff can happen. It's really so great to hear you validate that this is, that this is useful, but we can't get people to, we can't affect the sharing of the data and like rolling it up. I mean, that's.
I'll add on to what I think you're getting at here. You guys are you've already positioned yourself to be the center of kind of an upswelling here. So you're already there. Whether or not you realize that you've become the experts in this particular topic. So what you really need to do
has been a spurt as a grip under pressure
Yeah.
or something.
The expert is you know more about it than everybody else in the room. So you guys are the experts right now, and that makes you kind of the belly button of the upswell to kind of get things moving. So I would step right in there and say, yes, you need to start spreading the word, and some of these organizational.
Answer the question about being representative, like, I mean, I think emergency management across the board is very unique to the jurisdiction. I mean, for me, I do know, I mean, simple terms, there are a lot of other county emergency management offices that are just a one-person show. But just in that group, there's some that have internal GIS staff or department, and some that contract with a vendor. Ace, I would say you're kind of mid-level. We're small, you're the next level, because like same with dispatch, right? Like we have one person that sits in our dispatch center answering calls. You have
4 or 5. 4
or 5, and then there's like the larger metro counties that have, and it's kind of the same in that aspect. I think there is, the time does seem right when we talk about emergency management, because HSEM, they at the last AMEM conference talked about defining what emergency management is and how we can work together. And we told HSEM leadership that we were meeting with you guys and talking about this, and they were going to try and have someone here. Maybe there's somebody here. I'm sorry if there is, and I don't know. But I agree. Like, there's just a variety of emergency managements.
Yeah, and we could get some kickback that, what are you doing? Because we don't have time for that stuff. But if it's a matter of on their hazardous mitigation plan, there's a box that says, are you willing to share this with your neighbors or something? And that's the first step. It's like, hey, you don't even know this, but you agreed to share some of your information here. We should probably go to that question.
Yeah,
online
Teresa.
Yeah, so one thing that we're rolling out at Olmsted County is like a situational awareness dashboard and hub site, and focused on like the FEMA lifelines and whether or not it's red, yellow, green, whatever, as far as what the situation's going on in the county. As we recently deployed like a new solution for that's sort of set up for EOC to specify, but we're kind of taking it one step further, where we're hoping to essentially have all of these live data feeds coming into these dashboards that are telling EOC what the current situation is. So how many weather alerts are out in the county and things like that. we're hoping to tie into our 911 data and say, there's this many incidences, so the public safety is red today, so we're working towards that. So one nice thing for ArcGIS Online is NWS has a live alerts feed, and they have like their alert areas, and then it's pretty easy to tell dashboard to say, hey, is there an alert in our county? Change the communications lifeline to yellow today or something. So I was just kind of wondering, like with ClimaVision, are they hoping to essentially turn it into like an alert system, or is it just strictly radar raster data that meteorologists are going to have to interpret, and is that on their minds of creating something like a live feed in ArcGIS Online for other communities to,
They
tap
do have a
into?
way, there's 3 different paths that they can get that to us. One is through their own program. One is through GR Analyst 2, which I know the National Weather Service uses that in some emergency managers. And then they also, you can get it to us through Esri. So we haven't really even looked at some of that, but that's exciting too, because that's where we're just kind of dipping our feet in our water going, hey, maybe these GIS people aren't so bad and we can do some of this stuff. And maybe smart now we'll know there too.
In addition to that, we just had ClimaVision out in Minnesota and did a bunch of training to the people that are participating in the pilot project. And at the training, ClimaVision says, their data isn't the first data you should go and look at. You should always start with the National Weather Service, look at their data and what they're providing, then go look at theirs as that supplemental data, that additional tool in the toolbox to see if there's anything missing from the first look, and then go back to the National Weather Service. And we just had our field office a staff from the National Weather Service in Grant County, and we were talking about, how we're going to implement this locally into our local protocols. And they're going to come in January to our Fire Chiefs Association meeting, and we're going to talk about our local protocols on storm watch. Because right now, nothing's going to change with this additional data. It's just another tool in the toolbox. We're still going to, when they give us, you're in a watch or conditions are favorable, then we will implement this, and then we will share what we're getting until they can get it live into their system. We'll share from our level up to them, like we're currently already doing. But ClimaVision is not in the business, to my knowledge, of trying to be something new or replace what the National Weather Service is already doing. They just want to supplement it.
And that's not to say that maybe someday they won't get into the apps and stuff, but this is a relatively new company too. And their big goal right now is let's get these gap fillers in and let's get it to the people that need it. And then we can talk about that down the road, but it's not going to be for a while. Daniel?
Yeah, two points. As a meteorologist coming into, I work at pollution control agencies. I'm a meteorologist with some GIS background.
I'm sorry for all the stuff.
No, that's good. It's coming back, and also getting into our emergency management section that we're building and expanding upon. So this is perfect information. I've been aware of radar data issues for 30 years that I've worked in the business. You're doing it right. How you're supplementing the data. I remember looking at MPX, Aberdeen, Sioux Falls, Mayville radar, and you got to go back and forth to know what's going on as it comes into Western Minnesota, as well as satellite and other sources of data. Most people aren't meteorologists and be able to do that, right? So having that single site data, and that's what's different. If you have a radar app, you have single site data, that's what this is referencing. If you have like a weather channel or AccuWeather and it's all composite data, completely different. It's all those taking a picture every 5 minutes and they splat it out, and it's not very detailed. But it works as a mosaic data. I used to work with the weather channel, so I helped do that. But I'm trying to say that for your approach is right. The Weather Service, they're tied. It's $10 million per radar. That was 1988. God knows what they cost now. So there's a huge expense to put those radars, those S-band radars. And so the X-band, as they did in Oklahoma with the CASA site implementation, I'm glad they're doing that up here. So I think the approach is right. It's hearing it from not just meteorologists who are scientists that Most people don't believe us half the time anyway, but from your approach at the boots on the ground, I think is good. And then if it's AMEM, getting more word out to emergency managers, that's what we're trying to do even at PCA is like, we're here. We have meteorologists on staff. Our air quality program is nationally known now, but we're also trying to get into other things as well with our team. We have our GIS, the Esri, as it was mentioned by Teresa, we're using that tool. We pull those data in. So we have a dashboard in-house that we're looking at sharing with people in the agency. So that's good. And Esri's done a nice job of that. We have GR2. So we're in the same boat as you. We know the meteorologists, the weather service offices. So what you're doing is, I'm all for it. It's great.
Yeah, and we appreciate you coming today and appreciate that you're joining our gang because we're getting stronger and we're getting things done. And even on the other GIS stuff that you talked about, don't get frustrated because 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still progress. We're still getting better.
There are some other comments that really just comments online from Megan and from Kevin. I'll just try to encapsulate what you said. One was that there is this whole NG911 effort, and that's really engaging GIS folks with emergency management, at least on the response side for the public safety answering points. So that's helping make that connection. I don't know, Megan, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I was just listening to the need to connect emergency managers with the GIS. And it just reminded me of everything that we've been going through with NextGen for the last few years of connecting 911 call center managers with their GIS. And, we could learn from that initiative and build on that initiative as well. And it's proven very effective for both parties, for NextGen 911. And I think it's important to break down those barriers and better integrate. And it could bring in more funding for more GIS resources as well. I know causing more or creating more work can be scary, but if it also creates more funding, then that extra work won't be so scary. And it's important work, so.
And then I believe.
Yeah, and then Kevin online had a comment really just saying that this is really a case study for the need to aggregate authoritative data from the local level. This is a topic that is discussed in other circles as well. I mean, it's happening with address points and road center lines and parcels. And there are other parts of these counties that don't want to share data either for one reason or another. And so we're trying to break down those barriers and help everybody understand. I want to put in a plug for our Minnesota Counties GIS Association, which is an AMC affiliate. And we have representatives from all the counties in the state that get together on some kind of an increment, but we do have regional representatives as well. And we just had, every 2 weeks, we have like a 1 hour tea time, we're calling it, where our county GIS folks can all get together and talk about issues. And we had a really good conversation about this on Tuesday and the need to help everybody understand the need to share data and to contribute to statewide authoritative data sets so that everybody can use that. I don't know, Kevin, you want to unmute and comment?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Randy, with everything. That to me, I think that in order to, if you have anybody who's resistant still to sharing information, sharing data, one of the best ways to help change that is to show what type of impact something had and to illustrate that this was possible really because of the fact that we are able to have access to authoritative local information. And without that, this is what would have been the case instead. Those are the kinds of stories that help paint the picture and change minds.
The whole emergency management, emergency response, when you start talking about mutual aid, we're going to need help. You can't wait for the event to occur and for you to need the help to try and get our data or for us to get your data. How are we going to help you if we don't have your data? And if we always have your data, it can be included in our conversation, in our preparedness conversations, and so that's, I think it's an important piece.
All right, so I think we're coming up on the end point. Are there any more questions from the floor here? One more. Matt, Mike,
I've got four, but,
you got one, you get one.
which one do I pick? How many X-band radar
8 is what Climate Vision is looking
to
for.
fill the
To
gaps?
fill the gaps in Minnesota, and now some of those might, a radar might end up in North Dakota, but still the footprint, it would be about a 60-mile range. But they are looking to put 8 in Minnesota.
Okay, you get 2, that was a quick one.
I was interested from Daniel's perspective, how, what advantage would it be for National Weather Service to have X-band radars all over the state?
Fantastic if they could, but funding and one of the things they're looking at is phased array for the future. Navy has developed that. I think that's where they want to go, but you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, billions possibly. So that's probably where their focus is going to be down the road, but the X-band, C-band, and there's Climate Vision, but there's also other radar companies out there, EEC and others too. But I think that's probably, they would like the data and it would supplement, but I think their big long-term picture has been phased array, which is a different.
EEC is actually the company that Climate Vision buys their radars from. So Climate Vision is kind of the middleman that's packaging it, finding the contracts, putting it on the towers, and then providing that service. Because if we go to EEC and say, give us a radar, they'll throw something in our backyard, but we won't know what to do with it.
And just, I'll make it quick. You alluded to it earlier, so in 2020, right before COVID hit, Congress it was called the Reauthorization Act, which would allow like the federal agency, National Weather Service, to purchase data, but then COVID hit and it kind of got pushed to the back burner. And it's my understanding, don't quote me on this, but it's back out there and they're looking, it might get passed or whatever, so it's a way to help supplement for them to be able to purchase data. So.
Brady, can you help me? The 2 things are. Tina and Ace, I told you that you would get questions that would at least run a half an hour. And as you can see, I kind of brought things to an end because I know you have a long drive ahead. And so as a token of our appreciation for you making the effort to be here and providing with us with a superb presentation, we would like to at least, honor you by doing this. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I don't know. Gender appropriate pose in the current era we live in, but we really appreciate the fact that you came down and
We appreciate you guys having me.
so.
I'll have a snack for you.
Yeah, and Bob's comment, I think, is just so spot on. Don't downplay your expertise because you are now the experts. So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Just for everybody's information, we had about 30 people online for the presentation.
That's great. You had 13 here in a room, so you've done good. Okay,
Thank you.
all right, so
Thanks to everybody online for joining us.